Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Kiddushin Daf Ayin Daled, Kiddushin 74, and today's Daf Yomi is dedicated to a Yeshua Tzala for all of Klal Yisrael. And we're going to start on the bottom of 73b, 3 lines from the bottom. Gemara is discussing the concept of nemanus, and when is a person believed to make certain claims. So the Gemara says that 3 lines from the bottom, neman bal mikach, a person's involved in a business association, he's involved in a transaction, he's believed the owner of the object, let's say he's selling, for example, a watch, he's believed Omar, neman bal mikach Omar, he's believed to say, I sold my object to this person, but not to this person. Gemara says, Bamed var mamurim, when do we make such a claim? Bisman shemekacho biyado, when the object that he's selling is still in his possession, and then we're going to believe him. But if it's not, it's still in his possession, we're not going to believe him. Eino neman. Rashi says, because since he doesn't hold it anymore, and since it's not dependent upon him, he's not going to remember who he sold it to. So the Gemara says on the top of 74a, why don't we just see who gave him the money? Gemara's assumption here is that he only received the money from one of them. So therefore, he's for sure going to remember who he received the money from. So therefore, why don't we just see who you got the money from? So the Gemara says, no, they both gave him money. And he said, one of them gave it to me, I wanted him to give it to me. The other one gave it to me against my will. And I don't know which one was which. Now we're up to the next case of Nemanos. Neman Dayan Lomar, a judge is believed to say, a judge is believed to say, listen, I declare that this person I ruled in his favor, and I ruled against the other person. When do we believe the judge should say I ruled in this person's favor and I ruled against the other person's favor? When the litigants are standing there right in front of him. But if the litigants are not standing right there in front of him, then if the litigants are not standing there right there in front of him, we're not going to believe him. So when they're right there in front of him, we're going to believe him. So the Gemara says, well, why don't we see who has the paper saying that he ruled in his favor? The Gemara says, so no, we're not talking about that circumstance because it was torn up. They no longer have that piece of paper. So the Gemara says, so why don't we just have, well, if it's a case of black letter law, why don't we just go back and re-litigate the case? Because it'll be the same facts. The Gemara says, no, we're talking about a case of Shuda de Daina. Rashi says the case of Shuda de Daina means like to throw the judgment. Rashi says that it's not really a case of black letter law. It's a case of gray letter law, and the judge leans in one direction. Tosso says, well, no, if that would be the case, that would still be obvious that the judge would have the same leanings again. So we're talking about a case where basically like a flip of the coin, the judge can't figure it out, so he just to flip a coin, so to speak. He just has to arbitrarily choose one. And that's what Tosso says. Aram Nachman, Shloshin Emanin Ala Bachor. So then the next case of an Emanis, Rav Nachman says 3 are believed to say that if there's a case of twins, they're believed to say that this one is the firstborn. And these are the 3, Elohein, Chaya, Aviv, Ve'imo. A case of a midwife is believed, a father is believed, and Imo is believed. So Chaya, Aviv, Ve'imo. A case of the midwife, the father, and the mother. Chaya, the midwife, is believed the altar. She's believed immediately to say that this was that this was the way the baby came out. This one's the oldest. Imo, the mother is believed called Shiva, all the first 7 days, because Rashi says the baby's with her the first 7 days. And Aviv Olam, and the father is believed from that point on. Because in Tanya, like we learned, Yakir, it says in the pasuk that Ben Abachor Asnua Yakir, he has to know the firstborn son, even if it's of the hated woman, to give him the double portion. Means to say Yakirenu Acherim, that he has to that the father is believed to tell other people that this is the firstborn son. Mikan Rabbi Yehuda, from here Rabbi Yehuda taught Neman Adam Lomar Zebech B'nei Bechor. From here a person is believed to say, this is my firstborn son. The father is believed to testify. Just like a father is believed to say, this is my firstborn son. So too he's believed to say, so too he's believed to say, this one was the offspring of a divorcee and therefore is not a Kohen. The Chum say he's not believed at that point because there he's not just helping him, he's hurting him. Abba Shol. So then we come to the next case in the Mishnah that Abba Shol would call a shatuki a beduki. What's a shatuki? A shatuki is the one we don't know who the father is. We say quiet. If we find a baby, the baby has two fathers, we say quiet. But Abba Shol will call this person a beduki. So this person is what's called a suffix mamzer. We don't know who the father is, so maybe it could be a mamzer. So the Gemara says, my beduki. When Abba Shol will call this person a beduki, what's a beduki? So if you want to say it means shebodkin is imo romeres, that we ask the mother who's the father, and she says with kosher navalti, she says I was with a kosher man, and under those circumstances, under those circumstances, we're going to believe her. We're in the middle of 74a. Come on, we're going to say, like, so you mean to say that if that's what Abba Shol is saying, and who is he saying like? Is he ruling Karab and Gamliel? Is he ruling like Rabbi Gamliel that we trust the mother if she makes a claim that she's pregnant from a kosher woman, from a kosher man? Can't be the case that that's the case. Come on, Rabbi Gamliel, but there's a problem with saying that. Tanina Chadasim, and we already learned this in the Mishnah in Ksubos. Now we learned in the Mishnah in Ksubos. Let's say the woman was pregnant. We say, tell us about this fetus of yours. And Amrolam, she said to them, Miish Ploni. She says to them, listen, I became pregnant from this man, the Kohen who, and he's a Kohen. Meaning to say, when it says a Kohen here, it doesn't mean specifically a Kohen. It means he's good lineage. The baby's not a mamzer. Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer, Omer Ne'amenes, Rabbi Yeshua, Omer, Lomi Piano Chayin. Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer said we believe her under those circumstances. And Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua says we don't trust her. So why would we just have the same position repeated here? We could have just said Abba Shol should have been just listed with the other two opinions. We wouldn't be listed here as a separate position. And the law is like Rabbi Gamliel. So why would it be reported here as a minority position of Abba Shol? The Gemara says, well, there's two different rulings. Rabbi Gamliel's ruling that we rely upon her, that is to say that she's okay. We believe her to say that she didn't become disqualified, because if a woman has a relationship with a man who's a pasula, then she's prohibited to eat from the truma anymore. But it wasn't, or to marry a Kohen. But this was not. But Rabbi Gamliel didn't say that the fetus, the offspring, is going to be okay. That if she's a daughter, she can marry a Kohen. But Abba Shol says also the daughter can marry a Kohen, because our Mishnah is talking about a fetus, and we're saying that the fetus is a shtuki, and we could still, under those circumstances, we could ask her who is with. So therefore, it's two different scenarios. The Gemara says, well, but that only works according to the position. The Gemara in Ksubos debates, according to one who says that she's okay. Rabbi Gamliel is saying that the offspring is not okay. The offspring is not okay. That's the disputing Ksubos, Daf Yud Gimel. According to one who, the opinion in Ksubos, who says not only is she okay, but the offspring is also okay. Abba Shol, and then according to that approach, what's Abba Shol coming to teach us? The Gemara says, still Abba Shol is teaching us a Chiddush. Abba Shol is teaching us a bigger Chiddush. What's the Chiddush he's teaching us? If we just had the case over there, I might have said in that case, Rabbi Gamliel, we're talking about a woman who's in a town where most of the people are kosher for her to be with. But let's say she's in a place that there's 4 Jews there, and everybody else is not kosher to her. We might have said, maybe Gamliel doesn't say that. So therefore, Abba Shol says, even if Rov Psulim, we still believe her. So there, so Amarav Abba Shol, that we do rely upon the woman's testimony. So the Gemara says, Ko Asurin, Mishnah says, Ko Asurin lavo b'kao, Mutarim lavo b'zeh. So the Mishnah says, we have to read this Mishnah very closely. Whoever is prohibited to come into the kahal, we learned in the previous Mishnah, there are 4 categories of people who can't come into the kahal, marry into the community. Who are they? The shtuki, the one we don't know who the father is. That sufi, we don't know who the father or the mother is. The nisin, so those are out of a doubt. The shtuki and the sufi are out of doubt. And the nisin or the mamzer, those are, we know for sure they can't come in. That's the mamzer is from this prohibited union. And then the nisin is from this people who are not part of the Jewish people. They are like quasi-Jews. So they're not allowed to marry into the community. So whoever is prohibited to come into the community, so the shtuki can marry the mamzer, the asufi can marry the mamzer. So that's the first ruling. But Rabbi Yehuda Oser, Rabbi Yehuda says that is prohibited. We'll have to see what Rabbi Yehuda is prohibiting. Rabbi Lazar says vadam bevadan mutar. A certain with a certain is permitted, meaning to say a mamzer can marry another mamzer. Vadam besveikan, but if you have a mamzer wants to marry a shtuki, usveikan, or if you have a shtuki who wants to marry into a certain Jew, Sveikam Vadan, a shtuki wants to marry a complete one, like a mamzer or a nasin. Look at Rashi. Rashi say Vadam Sveikam, like a mamzer and a nasin with a shtuki or a sufi. That Rabbi Lezer is going to say prohibited because they might not be a mamzer, and so therefore I'll say it's prohibited. But Sveikam Vavadin, that's the opposite. That's a shisuki and a sufi who wants to marry a mamzer and a nasin. Or a sveikim is sveikim. If you have a shtuki who wants to marry another shtuki, or an asufi wants to marry an asufis, or a sufis plus shtukis, so then then Rabbi Lezer says it's prohibited. It's also because maybe one is kosher and one is puzzle. So that we're not going to allow. These are the ones who are called the sveikos, meaning that we're not sure if they're moms or that. These are the shisuki, the asufi, and the kusi. These are the shtuki, the asufi, and the kusi. Zok the Gemara. What does the Gemara? The Gemara says here, what does it mean? All those who are prohibited to come into the community. What does that mean? That they are allowed to marry each other. So the Gemara asked the question: if you want to say that this refers to the 4 categories that we just said in the previous Mishnah, the mamzer, the nasin, the shtuki, and the sufi, that they can all marry each other, but we have a problem saying that that's what our Mishnah is referring to. Atano Reisha. But the first clause, the previous Mishnah already said, they're allowed to marry each other. So why would it just repeat the same case? And furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda Oser. And second question is when it says in the second clause of our Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda prohibits it, what's he referring to? What's he referring to? Avada and Besveikan. If you want to say Rabbi Yehuda prohibits a certain mamzer with a shisuki, it can't be. Because that's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Hamidiktani Sefer Rabbi Lezer Omer Vadam Bevadam Mutar. From the fact that the last clause of the Mishnah, Rabbi Lezer says a certain mamzer can marry a certain mamzer, but a Vadam Besveika and Usveika Besveika and Aser. But from the fact that Rabbi Lezer says already in the last clause of the Mishnah that the Safek cannot marry this certain one, that the Shtuki can't marry the mamzer. It's obviously the case that Rabbi Yehuda is not saying that because otherwise it would just say Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yehuda are saying that. So Miklad Rabbi Yehuda was Svirle. So it's clear that from the last clause that Rabbi Lezer is arguing with Rabbi Yehuda. So what does Rabbi Yehuda mean when he says it's prohibited? So therefore, the Gemara says, V'chitema Rabbi Yehuda Oser. And if you want to say that when Rabbi Yehuda says it's prohibited, what he's referring to is a ger b'mamzeres. He's referring to a convert with a female mamzer. If that's what you want to say is prohibiting, and that can't be the case. Midei ger b'mamzeres katani. Does it really say in the first clause of the Mishnah that a ger cannot marry, that a ger is allowed to mamzeres? It says in the first clause of the Mishnah, whoever cannot marry into the community, and the convert is allowed to marry into the community. So therefore, what does it mean when Rabbi Yehuda is saying it's prohibited? So therefore, we're going to see 5 approaches to this. Okay, that's the next. Amud is 5 approaches. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda, now on the top of 74b, first approach. Excuse me. Rabbi Yehuda says, this is what it means. Kahuna. When it says whoever is not allowed to marry to the community can marry each other, According to Tanna Kamma, it means whoever is not allowed to marry a Kohen. That's what it means. That because a Kohen can't marry a convert, and so that's what it means. And my ninu and kosher mavobakal kahuna. And what does it mean? What does it mean? Umay ninu, and who are those who are not allowed to marry into the kahuna? That they are therefore disqualified and they can marry each other. My ninu. And this refers to the position that says even if she converts under the age of 3 years old, where the Gemara tells us elsewhere that there's a possibility that her pesulos will return. Nevertheless, this position is even if she converts less than 3 years old, she's prohibited to marry a Kohen, and they're allowed to marry into each other. Rabbi Shimon, and now like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who says that we're going to see later on in our chapter, he says the convert less than 3 years old is kosher to the kahuna. And so this is what our Mishnah is saying. I'm reading from the Rash. Whoever is prohibited to marry into the Kohanim, and who are these people? Rashi says, and who are these ones who have an additional aspect that they are prohibited to come into the Kal Yisrael, that this is an extra law, that these are Giores, a convert who's less than 3 years old, and for sure if she's more than 3 years old. So all these people are allowed to marry. So this Giores can marry the Mamzerim and then it's in the Shisuki. So anyone who is not allowed to marry a Kohen, and meaning to say, even somebody who converts less than 3 years old, they can marry the Mamzeris and the Shisuki. And this is like, and now like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who says that she's only prohibited from marrying the Kohen if she converts over the age of 3. So the Gemara says, well, why do we have to learn like that? Why don't we say it refers to somebody who's 3 years old and one day that she can marry a mamzer? And even according to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, why do we have to push it to say it's referring to somebody even under the age of 3? The Gemara says, no, we don't want to say that because imke mitzida tabra. If that would be the case, that we want to say our Mishnah is like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that we're saying that under 3 years old, she's allowed to marry a Kohen, and so therefore that person cannot marry a mamzer. So that would cause us a problem, a different inference, because that would have implied that if she's less than 3, she's not allowed to marry a mamzer. So we'll see as follows. Why? What's the reason? What's the reason why? What's the reason that she's allowed to marry the mamzer is because she's 3 years old and one day. That would imply that if she's less than 3 years old, then under those circumstances, when she converts the muteras of kal kahuna, that she's allowed to marry a Kohen, that would imply that Rav Shimon Chai would prohibit her if she's less than 3 to marry a mamzer. But we don't say that. Or Shimon Chai is actually muteras of kal kahuna, muteras of because Rabbi Shimon Chai says even though she's less than 3 years old, she's allowed to marry a Kohen, but she's still also allowed to marry a mamzer under those circumstances. So we don't want to say that the Mishnah is following Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai because we know that even though he allows her to marry a Kohen under 3, he also allows her to marry a convert. So the Gemara is now going to reject this first approach. It's saying it's referring to those people who can't marry to the Kuna, i.e. the Giras. The Gemara says, "Ukolo, do we really want to say this? To Kol Asurim Labova Kal Kuna, that anyone who's not allowed to marry a Kohen, Mutar Lavos Ebezek can marry a mamzer and a shitsuki. Variam Mano Grusha v'Chalola v'Zona. What about the case of the widow, the divorcee, the chalola, the harlot, the Asurim Lavova Kal Kuna? These are categories that cannot marry to the Kohen or a Kohen Gadol. Asurim Lavos Ebezek. That they are not allowed to marry the Kohen, and they still can't marry the mamzer. So it can't be that that's what we're talking about. V'su ha-mutar, and furthermore, from the fact that it says v'su, and furthermore, from the fact that it says that these people are allowed to marry the mamzer, even as long as they're ha-mutar, that's somebody who can marry. It would imply from the fact that it says that those who cannot marry into the Kohen can marry the mamzer. It would imply that those who are allowed to marry the Kohen are prohibited to marry the mamzer. Ha-mutter would imply that if they're allowed to marry into the Kohen, it would be prohibited to marry a mamzer. But we have a case of somebody who's allowed to marry into the community who's still permitted to marry a mamzer. So we don't like that inference because a male convert can marry a female Kohen, and he's also allowed to marry a mamzer. So we don't like that reading for that reason. So therefore, it says now second approach. This is what it means. Kol Kohen also he says spito. Any Kohen who cannot marry his daughter, Kol Kohen, Kol Shekohen also he says spito. Anyone who a Kohen cannot marry his daughter to, anyone who cannot marry his daughter to a Kohen, under those circumstances, we're going to say that such a person who a Kohen cannot marry his daughter to can marry a mamzer. Who are these people who a Kohen cannot marry his daughter to? Ger shenasa gioris. If you have a male convert who marries a female convert, that the Kohen cannot marry his daughter to. And so such a person, Ger shenasa gioris, his daughter is prohibited to marry Kahuna, according to Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, who says shemutar lavoz ebazeh, that these people are allowed to marry into a mamzer because he says the community of Gerim is not called the Kahal. And Rabbi Yehuda argues and he says it's prohibited because Rabbi Yehuda says they can't marry a mamzer because they are going to be considered Kal Gerim is called the Kahal. The Gemara says, wait 1 second. Kolu the Kol Shekohen also he says Pito Mutar Mavos Ebazeh. Do we really mean to say anybody who Kohen cannot marry his daughter to is permitted to marry a mamzer? What about a chalal who marries the daughter of a regular Jew? The Kohen also is sabito. The Kohen can't marry his daughter to this person because she's a chalala. And still, we're going to say they're not allowed to marry a mamzer. So the Gemara says, no, that we're not bothered by that issue. Why? Well, kasha, we're not bothered by that because we're going to say Rabbi Dustai ben Yehuda. We're going to say that our mission follows Rabbi Dustai's position that a chalal who marries a Bas Yisrael, his daughter can marry a kahuna. Gemara says, but wait, but still, chalal shenasa chalala. What about a male chalal who marries a chalala? The Kohen also is sabito. A Kohen cannot marry that girl. And they still can't marry a mamzer. And furthermore, another problem with this approach is v'su'am mutar, from the fact that it implies that anyone who Kohen can marry his daughter, also cannot marry a mamzer. And we have the same question we asked before. The Kohen, if you have a convert who marries a Jewish girl, Kohen's allowed to marry his daughter. And mutar and lavoz ebazeh. If you have a male convert who marries a Jewish girl, the Kohen can marry his daughter. Kohen can marry his daughter, but according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, we're still going to say they can marry mamzer because they're still going to be called the kahal gerim under those circumstances. So therefore, third approach. What are we talking about when our Mishnah says that it is permitted to marry a mamzer? Rabbi Yehuda says it's prohibited. We're talking about two different types of mamzerim, totally different approach. There are two different types of mamzerim. One could be somebody, we're having an argument about what's a mamzer. One is of the approach that a mamzer is somebody who comes from a kares union, a union where the Torah says that the punishment is basically death from having kares. And one is we're talking about approach that says a mamzer is somebody who comes from a penalty which would create death from a human court. So that's the dispute here. That our Mishnah is saying a mamzer me'achoso, which is if a person is a mamzer because of a union of a man and his sister, which the punishment is kares. So mamzer me'ishes ish, versus a mamzer that comes out of a union with a married woman. That is the ika benayel. That's the distinction between them. If such a mamzer who is born from his sister is permitted to marry a mamzer who is born from a married woman, if you can have a mamzer from your sister, can marry a mamzer from a married woman. Tanakama savar, I feel mamzer me'achoso nami have a mamzer. The Tanakama is in the position that a mamzer from your sister is going to be considered a mamzer, and so therefore they can marry a mamzer from a married woman. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda savar, no, if it's a mamzer from your sister, meishis ish have a mamzer me'achoso have a mamzer, and so therefore it's the woman who is born from a union with your sister, a man who is born from a union with your sister. That's not a mamzer according to Rabbi Yehuda, so they can't marry the other type of mamzer. My kamash. The Gemara says, well, what's the chiddush here? We already learned this dispute. Tanina, this was a Mishnah in Yevamos. Ezu mamzer. We already have a dispute over what's a mamzer. They are taught kol shu b'lo yavo. Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says any prohibition is a mamzer. Any prohibition whatsoever. Whereas Shimon Timni Omer kol shechayav and love kares b'dei shemayim. He says anybody who has a kares penalty. Halacha kedvarav. and the law is like Rabbi Shimon Atim. Rabbi Yeshua says, "Kol shechayav olav nisas bezdin." Anybody who has a debt from heaven, from a court, from a human court. So we see from here there's already a dispute. So what would our Mishnah be adding if this is the approach? What would our Nachman, according to Rav Nachman in the name of Rabbi Barafua, why would our Mishnah be arguing something we already argued? So therefore, a fourth approach, no, the fourth approach is saying that the dispute is talking about a case of a convert from the Ammonites and the Moabites, where we know that the Ammonites and the Moabites, if they're a male, they're not allowed to marry into the community. If they convert, they're allowed to convert, but they can't marry into the community. But the females can. And so therefore, this is what our Mishnah says. These Ammonites and the Moabites who can't marry into the community. According to the Tanakama, the Ammonites and the Moabites can marry a mamzer. But Rabbi Yehuda is saying that they can't. The Gemara says, wait 1 second. Why is Rabbi Yehuda prohibiting an Ammonite and Moabite to marry into the community? So the Gemara says, okay, you're right. Rabbi Yehuda would not prohibit it. Rabbi Yehuda would allow them to marry a mamzer. So therefore, the Gemara say a fifth approach. This is what it means. That when Rabbi Yehuda says it's prohibited for a ger who's an Ammonite and Moabite to marry to the community, he's saying, this is what he's really saying. Even though Rabbi Yehuda prohibits a regular convert to marry a mamzeres, when he prohibits a convert to marry a mamzeres, that's only a regular convert who can marry into the community. But a convert from an Ammonite or Moabite who cannot marry into the community, well, there Rabbi Yehuda is not prohibited. So that's how the Gemara understands what Rabbi Yehuda is prohibiting. Rabbi Yehuda is saying he's actually, according to this approach, this fifth approach, Rabbi Yehuda is not even arguing with the author of the Tanakh and the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says, I only prohibit a regular convert from marrying a mamzer, but an Ammonite and Moabite can. He's actually just explaining the position of the Tanakh. It's one long position. That's how the Gemara concludes. A brilliant Gemara. Okay, we'll stop here. God willing, we'll repeat this at 8 a.m. And if anybody has any questions.